Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board of Thursday, August 5th, 2021. Present at the front table to my far left is Jessica Vitale, a voting member.
Good evening.
To my immediate left, Ed McGargy, a voting member. My far right, Margie Buchanan, Assistant Zoning Officer for Haverford Township. Next to Margie is Kelly Kirk, Zoning Officer for Haverford Township. Jesse Poynton, a voting member. And to my immediate right, Bill Rhodes, voting member. And present via Zoom is our solicitor, Bill Malone. Before we begin, Bill, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure. Please rise if you can and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one decision and one new case on the agenda this evening. The decision is case Z21-22. Adama Kappa, owner of 2901 Haverford Road, Ardmore, PA, DC folio number 2206-0103800, who seeks a variance from the provisions of section 182727C1 to erect 85 feet of 4-foot aluminum fence that will encroach into the required 20-foot front yard setback by 20 feet. Property is owned R6 and located in the 6th Ward. Jessica, would you please take that decision?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application with the following condition: that construction will be complete within 1 year and in accordance to the notes of testimony.
Okay. Ed?
I concur.
Jesse?
I concur.
Bill?
I concur.
And so do I. That application is approved with those conditions, 5-0. Our new case is Z21-21. Haverford Township Free Library Association, lessee of the property located at 1601 Darby Road, Havertown, PA, DC folio number 2207-0032800, who seek variances from the following provisions for the construction of an addition to the existing library building. Section 182802, to enlarge non-conforming building. Section 182602C3, to further exceed the permitted building coverage from 54.14% to 77.04%. Section 182602C4, to reduce the existing 0.94 feet front yard setback provided on Mill Road to 0.73 feet. Section 182602C5, to provide a 0-foot side yard setback where 50 foot is required. Section 182602C6, to provide a 28-foot rear yard setback where 75 foot is required. Section 182602C8, to increase the impervious surface ratio from 94.08% to 96.77%, where 40% is the maximum. Section 182602F, to provide 17 off-street parking spaces where 38 are required. And section 182718B2 and 3, to encroach into the existing non-conforming buffer area along the rear and side property lines. Additionally, the applicant seeks a determination that the existing area and bulk nonconformities may be lawfully continued. Property is owned INS and located in the 7th Ward. So who do we have?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Freemuth. I'm an attorney at Whistler Pearlstein, here representing the library. Before I get going with an introduction and then a description of or identification of the witnesses I have, I know that the township solicitor is here, so I would suggest maybe he can enter his appearance on behalf of the township, and then he can turn it back over to me if that's okay with the board.
Okay with us? Hey, Jim.
Good evening, members of the board. It's been a while since I've seen you all. Nice to see you. I'm here tonight. It's a little bit unusual situation. We're the owners of, when I say we, I mean the township. We're the owners of the property in question here. So, and you know, under a lease to the library for a long term. But we have reviewed the plans. And again, when I say we, I mean the commissioners have had an opportunity to review the plans. And we are okay with what is being done. I guess I'm here to give my approval for standing wise that we are okay with this. The board appreciates the services the library is providing now and has provided in the past, and we just came here, they sent me here tonight to make sure that the board is aware that the commissioners have no problem. So, thank you very much, and good seeing you all again.
Okay, good seeing you too, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. As I mentioned, I do have an introduction I'd like to go through before I get to my witnesses. Of course, we just heard the relief that was read into the record and was advertised, but there is certainly a history that goes along with the library and its proposed expansion, so I think it would be to everybody's benefit if I could just lay that out a little bit before we get into the testimony. So the reason the library is here today pursuing the zoning relief for this addition is a simple one. The library needs more space to offer the services expected of a 21st century library. If you don't already know, what you'll hear in the testimony this evening is that the need for library expansion has existed for decades. The library currently occupies an old bank building dating back to the 1930s, which was last expanded in 1970 to form the library building everyone knows today. A lot has happened in the 40-plus years since the last library expansion. I believe every other library in Delaware County has renovated and/or expanded. The fact that Haverford Township Free Library has not expanded is through no lack of effort on the part of those who have served the library, the township, and other stakeholders. Going back at least 20 years, the library has engaged 2 separate experts and 2 architectural firms to study the library's facilities and services. All the experts and professionals have agreed that more space is necessary. And the task of trying to figure out how to provide more space in a reasonable manner, both financially and with a sense of community, has its own long history. Numerous options for a new library facility or the renovation of an existing library structure elsewhere in the township were discussed and vetted. Several options related to the expansion of the existing library through the acquisition of adjoining property were discussed and vetted. For various reasons, all those options were either rejected or determined not to be feasible after thorough evaluation. Now the library is here this evening with a proposal that I guess has made it further than any of the other proposals that have been considered over the past 15 to 20 years. What the library is proposing in this application before you is a second floor addition to the existing library building and the construction of a new facade facing Mill Road. The addition will measure approximately 5,100 square feet if you look at the addition from the perspective of additional building coverage, or approximately 5,300 square feet when you consider how the addition impacts the use of some of the existing square footage in the building. As you'll hear during the testimony, the additional square footage will have a substantial impact on the services provided by the library, since it will address many of the deficiencies that have been identified by the experts and professionals, namely the ability to provide the quality and range of services expected of a modern library, including improved spaces for teenagers, middle schoolers, young children and families, higher quality space for seniors, and access to technology. As you see on the plans and renderings submitted, the proposal will extend over top of a portion of the existing parking lot and access drive, which will be reconfigured. The number of parking spaces will not decrease from the existing condition. However, much like the library itself, the property that the library is located on is just flat out undersized. The library today is non-conforming with regard to almost every bulk zoning requirement that applies in the institutional district. So there's nowhere for the library to expand on this site without triggering the need for zoning relief. The library has made application for the relief identified in the notice, which includes variances from the provisions limiting the expansion of non-conforming buildings, as well as the underlying bulk requirements applicable to properties in the institutional district. I don't want to get into the weeds with a legal analysis of variances at this point, because I know this is a sophisticated board who's very active, but I would ask you to keep in mind that I believe the variances being requested are purely dimensional in nature, as opposed to a use variance. Dimensional variances are evaluated under a more relaxed standard of review, which I know has been the subject of many opinions by our Commonwealth Court and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. However, I still believe you're allowed to consider additional factors when considering dimensional variances as opposed to a use variance. And I think the factors in this application warrant the variances requested when you consider the physical limitations of this property, the nature of the library's use, and the absolute need to expand, and the fact that the best place for this library is probably right where it is, close to the schools and within easy walking distance of thousands of residents, which is why it's so busy and so popular, and the benefits that this expansion will provide to the entire community. In addition, I'm hopeful you will find that the library has tried to be as good a citizen as possible with its neighbors through communication about this application and adjustments to the plan in response to comments from the neighbors. All in all, which has resulted in the minimization of the impact of this proposed addition, and it's ensured that the library continues to be an asset to the neighborhood and the community in general. So I have 4 witnesses this evening. I have Bill Wilson, who will be joining us via Zoom. He's a library services expert who's worked with the library for many, many years. I have Lee Casasio, who is a former longtime resident of the township and an architect, who also performed work for the library for many years. I have Tammy Ray Barr, who's our civil engineer from Monmouth, who prepared our engineered plans. And then I have Guy DiMartino, who's a traffic engineer from TPD, who prepared a traffic evaluation of the proposed addition. So before we get to Bill, I do have an exhibit packet with pre-marked exhibits, which I will pass out for our presentation. The exhibits are pre-marked in tabs 1 through 14, so I will be referring to them as applicants' exhibits A1 through 14.
Thank you.
I guess if I can have Bill Wilson sworn in via Zoom, that'd be great.
I couldn't understand you, Andy. Who are you going to call first?
Bill Wilson. He's on with us via Zoom.
Hello, Bill.
Good evening.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and the capacity in which you appear this evening for the board, please.
My name is William Bill Wilson, and I'm appearing as a library expert.
Bill Malone?
Yeah, could you clarify, or Andy, could you
Yeah.
clarify what's meant as a library expert?
Sure, I have a series of questions I'll ask Bill about his background, which I think will get us to a point where I'll ask the board to accept him as an expert in library services, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Bill, can you describe for the board your educational background, employment history, and professional experience?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in English literature from Gordon College in Massachusetts, master's degree in library science from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and extensive postmaster's degree work in both library science and urban and regional planning from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I worked as a library practitioner for more than 20 years prior to embarking on a full-time consulting career in 1995. As a practitioner, I worked as a branch library manager in an urban library system, interlibrary loan librarian, an extension services librarian, assistant administrator for a 7-county regional library system, director of a medium-sized public library, director of the Milwaukee County Federated Library System, and I also served as Wisconsin's state librarian. As a consultant with Himmel and Wilson, I completed more than 500 projects with libraries, regional library systems, state library agencies and federal agencies in 46 states and in the District of Columbia.
Bill, can you just give us an idea of some of the local geographic scope of your work?
Sure. In terms of local projects, if you look at the Philadelphia area, Himmel and Wilson completed approximately 50 projects with libraries in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, including a master plan for all public libraries for the state of Delaware, a master plan for the Lower Merion libraries that resulted in the expansion of the Ludington, Bala-Cynwyd, Penn Wynne libraries, as well as improvements in Ardmore and the Gladwin libraries. Also worked in a number of other communities nearby and in the Philadelphia area. Free Library of Philadelphia is also a past client.
Thank you. I guess library services would be the evaluation, analysis, and providing professional services to libraries with respect to their facilities and the services they provide, with recommendations as to how to address the results of the analysis through planning, renovation, and expansion. And I asked the board if they'd accept Bill as an expert in that respect.
And I would ask our solicitor, Bill Malone, do you have any questions for Bill Wilson?
I do have a few questions.
Sure.
What can you tell me exactly what type of firm Himmel and Wilson is?
Himmel and Wilson is a library consulting firm. So our clientele consists of libraries, primarily public libraries, state library agencies, regional library systems.
Okay, and what type of employees in terms of fields of expertise does Himmel and Wilson employ?
Himmel and Wilson has had only 3 employees, the 2 partners, Ethel Himmel, who also happens to be my wife, who has a PhD in library science, and clerical assistants.
Okay, when you use the term, or when Mr. Freemuth uses the term library services, can you be a little more specific as to what that means to you? I've heard Mr. Freemuth, but what does it mean to you?
The framework of library services is something that is changing. As I've already stated, I've worked in libraries for a long period of time. Over that time, obviously, the technology use of materials has changed, the nature of delivering services, the nature of workflows in libraries have changed, the relationship with vendors regarding both the processing of materials, the acquisition of materials has changed. We've provided advice in those regards as well as in the facilities area.
Okay, and when you say in the facilities area, what do you mean?
Really everything from being engaged to help libraries in initial space needs analysis, how much space do we need to adequately serve our community, down to helping with selection of furnishings. So really the entire range. Sometimes we're engaged by libraries themselves. Sometimes we serve as a subcontractor to architects that have been hired to work on library projects.
When you talk about the analysis of space requirements, does your firm retain outside consultants to assist in that regard?
We do on occasion. We have in-house capabilities to do a lot of analysis, both demographic and GIS work, that type of thing. But we have engaged other firms for specific purposes, traffic studies, for example.
When you say GIS, what is GIS?
Geographic Information System. So the use of graphical maps to demonstrate, for example, service use. You may be familiar with maps that show call volumes for fire departments, for example. From the library perspective, we'll often do GIS work to analyze where usage is coming from, to approximate the appropriate location for a new facility, or to judge the facility's current location.
When you say judge the facility in its current location, what does that entail?
It really is a matter of looking at the nature of the community, both in terms of traffic patterns that are driven. The walkability of neighborhoods is very important. So the number of people that walk with are within a walking or biking distance to the library. Those kinds of things come into play, as well as the location of other nearby libraries. In today's modern world, in terms of libraries, there are many open access agreements among libraries that let people choose a library that they use. And that's an important factor as well. It's very, very different to have a library that doesn't have another library for 50 miles around, and one that may be surrounded by other libraries with which there are cooperative agreements.
Okay, and you're not a civil engineer, correct?
I am not.
And you don't have any specialized training in the development and layout of a internal library facility, correct?
Well, it means, depends on what you mean. Have a great deal to do with the functionality of libraries and workflows, and looking for how various functional areas should be arranged, the adjacencies of those areas. That's a very important factor that comes into play when we develop building program statements that describe how a building should lay out in terms of how much space for what functions, which functions should be located near each other, which functions should be separated from each other.
But those are then provided to someone who performs the layout or development of the inside, correct?
Absolutely. That is the realm of the architect. We often are asked to review architectural plans from that functional standpoint, looking for opportunities to increase the supervision of library spaces, for example. Staffing is the most important, the most expensive portion of library services. And consequently, we're always looking for opportunities to allow large spaces to be supervised by as few staff members as we can.
Bill, anything else, Bill Malone?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you have any other questions, Bill Malone?
Yes, I was finishing up. So is it fair that from a library consultant standpoint, your primary work is the analysis from a GIS perspective of the needs of the community, and then an analysis of the needs internally within the library, but that, you then rely upon engineers and architects for the actual development of the property itself?
Yeah, I think you're overstating the importance of the GIS. That's simply a tool. However, very definitely the design of the facility is the realm of the architect.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. King.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is that area of expertise description adequate for you, Bill Malone?
It is with that last clarification.
Okay. And, unless there's
It is with that last clarification.
You're breaking up, Bill.
Okay, it is with that last clarification. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Okay, unless there's an objection from any of the board members, will accept Bill Wilson as an expert in the general area of library. Go ahead, Andy.
Thank you. Bill, you're familiar with the Haverford Township Free Library and the community served by the library, correct?
Yes, over the past roughly 9 years, I've been in Havertown and at the Haverford Library at least a dozen times.
Okay. Can you describe in a little more detail the nature of your engagement with the library?
Late in 2012, I was contacted by Lee Casaccio, who's going to be speaking with you. Lee was then with Casaccio U Architects, and he is someone that I had worked with before. In fact, we worked together on the projects in Lower Merion, and he told me about a space utilization study for the Haverford Library. We subsequently were retained by the library, not by the architect, to help with the space needs analysis and the development of building program statements.
Okay, so as part of that engagement, you did prepare an analysis of the library's services, programs, and facilities.
Yes, as part of that engagement, I developed both an analysis of the existing building and provided professional recommendations.
Okay, and as part of your work, you became familiar with the fact that the existing library consists of the old Bake building, which was first occupied in the 30s and then was expanded in the 70s to create the library building we have today. That's right?
Yes,
Okay.
Very familiar.
Okay, so I'm going to refer to what's been marked A1 in my exhibit packet. Just for the record, and since Bill's on Zoom, this is a 3-page document. The first page has a title, Haverford Township Free Library Facility Planning Overview. The same text is in the footer, and then below that says Himmel and Wilson Library Consultants, August 2013. Bill, did I provide a copy of this overview to you via email in advance of this hearing?
Yes, I did. You
Okay.
did, and I had it in my files as well.
Okay, and this is a facilities planning overview document that you prepared as part of your engagement with the library?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and I just mentioned this, but just to be clear, this was prepared, or it's dated August 2013, is that right?
That's correct.
And am I correct that this was part of a larger study that you prepared for the library in 2013?
Yeah, we did peer comparisons with other libraries in the area, both in Delaware County, Montgomery County, and in an extended, extended region around Havertown. We looked at previous studies that had been done. There were several that had taken place in 2003, as well as the typical functional analysis, things like collection size, staffing workspaces, public seating, public access computer seating, and so on.
Okay. And in a little more detail and with reference to this overview as you see fit, can you just take the board through a summary of your analysis and the conclusions concerning the library facilities and the operations?
Yeah, obviously, when you come into a project where there have been previous studies, you're interested in what others have found. There were 2 studies that had been done in 2003, one by Cicada, a Philadelphia area architecture firm, the other one by Richard Beauray. Mr. Beauray was the former director of the Dauphin County Library in Harrisburg, but also did a lot of library consulting projects. The number that I found was approximately 90 studies. When we looked at those, we found that we really concurred with the findings of those studies. Both found that the building was considerably undersized. Mr. Beauray was commissioned by the library to prepare a building program statement. That building program statement called for a facility of 42,936 feet. our study confirmed those findings or found that the building was undersized, certainly, and that a larger facility was both necessary and very well justified.
And did you also find that the library here is one of the busiest libraries in the county?
Yes, as part of the analysis, we took a look at usage, and by any number of metrics that we typically apply, the library is extremely busy. We looked at things like the number of visits, circulation per capita, a measure called turnover rate, which is a measure of the degree to which library collections are actively used. And by all of those measures, the Haverford Library typically rated first or second among its peers within the county.
Okay. And is it true that the size of a library directly impacts the library's ability to provide services?
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the maxim that was coined by Louis Sullivan, that in architecture, form follows function. We have a slightly different spin on that. And what we say is library facilities facilitate. In other words, the reason that you design library spaces is to enable that facility to be used for certain purposes. That's the role of the library specialist on the team in designing a library, is to kind of translate those service needs into facilities that enable the staff to deliver those services.
And as part of your 2013 study, you created 2 building programs for the library. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. We did one that essentially was within the footprint building program. In other words, how can we squeeze every bit out of the building that currently exists? The second one wasn't really the ideal facility, but it was applying current standards to determine the size and nature of the building. It's interesting that the introduction to the within the footprint building program says the following. Although the need for a considerably larger facility has been clearly documented, and in the professional opinion of this consultant is well justified, multiple efforts to secure a larger space, either by building a new library or renovating a larger existing structure, have failed in the past. This program is an effort to afford the library the greatest opportunity for quality library service as possible within the amount of space available. And it then further says, it should be noted that some significant compromises are required to achieve a reasonable balance between and among spaces for collections, public seating, meeting spaces, and staff workspace. Specifically, adult collection sizes would need to be reduced in size by approximately 6,000 volumes, primarily to allow more space for customer seating and for the seated use of the library's Wi-Fi network using personal devices. The program details 19,784 net assignable square feet with a total building size of 23,741 square feet. The second program reached a conclusion of 38,833 gross square feet. The introduction to that says the space included is considerably larger than the existing library. However, it is consistent with contemporary library standards and practice for a library serving populations similar to Haverford. So basically, the first of the 2 building programs was how do we squeeze as much as we can out of the square footage that's available within the footprint. The second tried to apply contemporary standards to determine the size of a building.
And just to kind of piggyback or sum that up, you do say in this overview, clearly the Haverford Township Free Library's space deficiencies are real. Would you
Very
agree with
definitely.
that? Would you agree with that statement today as well as back in 2013?
Yeah, it's even more so today, and the historic record shows that this has been the case for at least since 2003 with the previous two studies.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. You are familiar with the current proposal that's the subject of this zoning application, which calls for an addition of approximately 5,100 square feet to the existing building, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and we're going to turn from A1 now and move to A2, which is a set of 3 documents down at the bottom described as block plan feasibility study prepared by Bernardin. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3. They are essentially floor plans, conceptual floor plans of the library. Bill, did I provide these to you via email prior to this hearing so that you could be
Yes, you
prepared?
did.
Okay, and you're familiar with these documents, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and as I mentioned, these are conceptual floor plans of the library, so they're still a work in progress, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And even though they're a work in progress, do they generally show the allocation of the use of space within the library, which could result in the event that the proposed addition is constructed?
Yes, in fact, the plans are very well conceptualized. They're consistent with many of the space allocation and space adjacencies that were included in the earlier building programs. They even reflect some recommendations that I made after reviewing them in February of this year. As a favor to Mr. Casaccio, who's been a long-term friend and professional colleague, I reviewed the plans before Haverford called and asked whether I would assist in reviewing the plans. So they even incorporate some changes that I suggested in February.
Okay. Could you take us through these floor plans, Bill, one by one, and I'd like you just to describe the nature of the use and kind of the impact that the addition will have on the positive use of all of the space in the library.
Okay. What I'm seeing right now is the one that has 1 on the lower right-hand corner, which is the lower level. Lower level is least impacted by what is happening. There is a change, though, from the earlier within the footprint plan. In that plan, there was an attempt made, as I said, to squeeze every bit of functionality out of the space. And there was a proposal to take the area that's on the left-hand side that says no renovations in this area. Area will be used as storage. That area is a basement area under the old bank. So what you're seeing in that block of blue essentially is the lower level beneath what was the bank and bank lobby. That area was considered for using for public space. The ceiling clearances are not there. It would have required actually digging out that area, and a decision was made that the value received for that effort was not worth the kind of space that could be created in that area. So that area will be used for storage space. That does assist the entire plan in that storage space was pretty short in the plan that was there before. This will allow for better storage space than the library has. Let's move to the first floor and we can talk there about the impact, and I'll talk about how the additional space on the second floor allows spaces to kind of cascade, and spaces on the first floor become more usable because of what is proposed for the second floor. The area in the lower left corner that's identified as senior reading living room is the old bank lobby area. There are conceptual plans and some renderings that show that area as a very, very attractive seating area for the community to sit and read in relative comfort in an area that's relatively quiet. Right now, the situation is that that area is a favored area by teens. And it's an area that the teens use simply because they don't have an adequate area of their own. So what we're going to see when we get to the second floor is that by creating some additional spaces that are appropriate for teens, we start to have impacts on the first floor as well in how those spaces can be used and creating preferred spaces for some various demographics that use the library quite heavily. Let's move to the second floor and we'll talk about what's new there. You can see that there is a dotted line that kind of indicates the footprint of the current first floor, both the original bank building and the addition to the building that was made. The portion of the second floor that's new is at the top of the area where it says intergenerational area, family area, preschool, parenting, sensory area, and along the side where it says innovation zone and meeting room space. The intent here is to really create spaces that serve various different demographics well. Right now, it's a children's area, and it's a little bit of a free-for-all. As I mentioned, creating a young adult space, which you see is at the lower portion of this second floor, that space is dedicated young adult space in a space that currently is occupied by children's services. We're enabling that to happen with this design by creating additional children's spaces and in fact, a safe area for preschoolers. You'll notice that the preschoolers are kind of in the far corner of that second floor, getting them away from the stairs, getting them away from the elevator, getting them into an area that can be used by families without that conflicting of the younger children. We also are able to provide spaces that can be used by kind of a tween group, that group of middle schoolers that are in between the young children and the teenagers. And that buffer space also makes that children's area much more attractive, much more usable. The innovation zone is an area that is an active learning space, hands-on learning. That would be for people of all ages. It could be used for people of all ages. There's an additional meeting room space and much needed tutoring rooms. Right now, there's a lot of tutoring that happens in the library that happens in open areas and open tables currently. And this creates spaces where tutors can interact with students in a relatively quiet space, a space that isn't quite out in the public glare, more comfortable space for the learner as well.
So this is really going to improve the usage for all ages and all patrons, right, Bill?
That's right. There are a number of things that are changing in libraries. We like to say that libraries aren't just a place where you get stuff anymore. they're a place where you do stuff as well. So the active hands-on learning is part of library programming, and this design allows for those kinds of spaces.
And would this design address to a great extent the space deficiency that you've identified, and also that has been identified by the prior experts engaged by the library?
Yeah, it certainly addresses some of the needs in the 2003 study, but it also addresses needs that are unfolding as we speak in terms of new and emerging services and new and emerging technologies.
And you're aware of the character of the neighborhood that surrounds the library, right, Bill?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And can you just speak for a moment on how you see the library and how it fits into the neighborhood in particular?
Yeah, I think the characterization that I would offer is this is a wonderfully walkable area and neighborhood. It has a unique mix of commercial, the educational campus nearby, as well as the residential. Lots of communities that we've been involved with are trying to create walkable spaces within their community. One of the real assets to the current location is its walkability and its location in close adjacency to the schools. Many of the school users show up at the library on foot or on bicycle, and that's certainly an asset given the parking challenges.
Okay, so I know you prepared two different programs for the library, one in which involved kind of staying at the site and the other which involved looking elsewhere. Based on the comments that you just provided, do you believe that the library's ability to renovate here on this existing site and remain in its current location will be a significant benefit to the community and the neighborhood?
I certainly do. I'll say that time has been a friend as well. We believe, and the research shows that print collections are still strong. Nevertheless, technology does afford some possibilities of reducing some spaces within libraries. And as an illustration, I'll mention the fact that DVDs and to a certain extent, the idea of audiobooks that are books on CD are quickly turning into dinosaurs. And consequently, we can free up some spaces. So in fact, the space need in 2021 may be a bit less than it was in 2013.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Wilson at this time.
Bill Rhodes?
Okay, hey, Mr. Wilson. I do have a couple questions, so just bear with me for a second.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier in your testimony about cooperation agreements with other libraries. Can you explain how those work both within the county and also maybe community libraries outside the county, like in Lower Merion, and what the impacts of those cooperation agreements are on the need for stacks on site?
Yeah, I can't speak to the current agreements. I haven't reviewed those in a long period of time, but the tradition of Delaware County libraries has been one that has provided access to libraries within the county, and there are many shared services that are provided within the county in terms of interlibrary loan and being able to request materials online and get them at your local library as well. That is a real strength and a real asset. And it doesn't take away the need for local libraries. However, it does, I think, lessen the need for every library needing all of the panoply of spaces that might be necessary.
Okay, in Exhibit 1, A1, I guess, in the second paragraph, you reference statistics of the state of West Virginia.
Yeah.
Why were you referencing the state of West Virginia as opposed to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or some other jurisdiction that may be more geographically proximate?
Yeah, we picked on West Virginia from time to time because we found that most people don't want to be compared to West Virginia as the standard of measure. And essentially what we were saying is generally we wouldn't think of West Virginia as being the epitome of services like library services. And they have a 0.5 square feet per capita standard that in fact is higher than the Haverford Library in its present form. So we were simply kind of taking it to the extreme and picking on the West Virginia standard. The other point that I'd make is that West Virginia, to its credit, is one of the few states that does have a specific standard in terms of libraries. As part of the work that we did, the state of Delaware does as well. The state of Delaware standard for developing their new libraries is 0.75 gross square feet per capita. And in Delaware, there is a state program that assists with funding for building local libraries, but to qualify for those funds, you need to meet that 0.75 gross square feet per capita.
Right. So here you've used West Virginia as an example that we would not necessarily want to aspire to, yet as proposed, we're underneath that gross square footage number. And after the expansion, the result would be, what's the gross square footage result per capita?
We had that number and don't know that I have it at my fingertips.
I believe it's slightly over.
Sorry, we'll wait for Bill to find it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have it, Bill?
I don't, did you get it there?
We have it, but
0.532. Okay, so we'd be,
Okay.
Ask him if that
is,
fits with the
Andy,
recollection.
Bill, just, are you familiar with what that number is after the proposed addition? Have you seen that number?
Yes, I have.
Okay, is it your recollection that it's 0.532 after the proposed addition?
That sounds correct and consistent with my knowledge.
all right. But you were holding out the 0.50 as a standard not to be aspired to also, right?
That's correct.
And then later in this, in Exhibit A1, you talk about significant compromises required to achieve a reasonable balance between and among spaces for collection, public seating, meeting spaces, and staff workspaces. Let's talk about what those compromises are. If we're going to be asked to approve a facility with a slew of variances, it would be interesting to me, at least, to find out where the balance of those compromises have come out and what we're going to get for that.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my statement that time has done us a favor here. In particular, one of the space hogs in libraries, and just think about your most recent visit to the library. One of the areas that takes a considerable amount of space is the physical collection of materials. Two things help to reduce the need for that portion, which is the largest portion of space. One is what I mentioned before, formats that are falling by the wayside, and we can anticipate that the situation will get better as more and more items are downloaded as opposed to taken out in physical form. People may still get those materials, and in fact do, through the library, and library licensing online resources for people. However, they don't take the physical space that is necessary. The other mitigating factor that I'd point to is the one that I mentioned in terms of cooperation with other libraries. The fact that you've got many libraries within the county that you share finding tools with those libraries, and that materials can be delivered very, very quickly to the Haverford Library for the use of local residents. That places the library in a position that I'd characterize as being a just-in-time library as opposed to a just-in-case library. The traditional model of the library is the just-in-case collection. We have it just in case somebody comes in and wants those materials. In the current framework, we're moving more toward the just-in-time collection, offering the public the collection that is most usable, and supplementing that with materials that are shared between and among libraries. Interestingly enough, it's not always the largest libraries that have the most unique collections. An experience that I had nearby your area when we were working with Lower Merion, and I don't know whether this is still the case or not, but the Penn Wynne Library, which is one of their smallest libraries, was the place to go to get foreign films. And people were aware of that. So they had collections strengths that were different. And in fact, people would go to that library versus the Ludington Library. So you get this situation in which libraries, being cooperative, are able to extend the size of their collections. That reduces the amount of space that's necessary for housing those collections and allows more human space. The one other factor that I'd mentioned that has done us a favor and contributes to this is that when we were doing the study in 2013, we were very concerned with the number of public internet stations that were available, the traditional terminals that people would use. People are still using library services and library computers. However, many and probably most of the computers users in the library are doing one of two things. They're either bringing their own equipment with them, whether that's a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, some other device, or many libraries, and in today's world, most libraries are providing materials or laptops or tablets that can be checked out and used on the library's Wi-Fi network within the library. What that means is that seating can serve a double purpose. You don't need as many dedicated seats for sitting in front of a computer terminal because I can now sit in an easy chair that has the availability of power and a strong Wi-Fi network, and gives me the access that I need without the space that's necessary to have the traditional desktop computer workstation.
So if the past 8 years has been a friend to the library, yet we're being asked to approve variances for a building that will last for multiple decades, is it fair to assume that the improvements or the conveniences that have occurred in the last 8 years that have been a friend to the library would not continue, and that they will continue to need this extra space, as opposed to allowing the continued evolution of these changes in the space they have?
Yeah, what I would ask you to look at is not the 21, 24,000 square feet, but to look at the larger numbers that were on that applying contemporary standards. So if we go back and we instead apply the 30,000 plus square feet, what we're talking about is being able to accomplish in the proposed footprint with the addition on the second level, to be able to accomplish what we were proposing could be accomplished in that somewhat larger space that was described in the second building program.
On the floor plan for the lower level, you have much of the original footprint of the bank building is, it was decided not to renovate that as public space because the ceiling was too high, or you'd have to dig out the floor. And that was, you said, I think you testified that there was a decision not to do that. Can you explain why you would forego such a large amount of space, and what would be the cost to lower the floor in that area and make it usable?
I would defer that question, based on actually exactly what Mr. Malone was suggesting. That's more an engineering, architectural question, and I'm not the appropriate person to offer cost information like that.
Okay, and then let me ask a question. The senior reading living room on the first floor, which apparently has been popular with teens, why, from a library use perspective, would you expect teens not to continue to use that? And why would they prefer to be near the children, where I presume teens would like to be separated from small children as a sign of advancing age and maturity? And also because at the corner on the living room, it's highly windowed and it's street level, and I could see why teens would continue to want to be there.
I think what you need to look at is the other amenities that will be on that second floor. And I think both the design factors that are there and in particular the spaces that are located in the innovation zone, we're providing an area that's going to offer the teens really what they are looking for. Right now, the teen collection, such as it is, relatively small, is located adjacent to what is identified as the senior reading area. So right now, one of the things that draws the teens to that area is also an area very close to where the materials that are aimed at that age level exist. They're essentially back toward the area that says mysteries in the current arrangement. Their materials are moving to the second floor as well, and that in the innovation zone and the more modern look of the second floor, I think, is going to be attractive. The space does provide some separateness from the young adults and the teens, the area that says children's, that is above where it says young adult desk. You can see a dotted area that says children's. That is the area that we're looking at as sort of a transition area for the tweens, so the middle school kids. So what you've got is young adults towards the bottom there, a sort of a transition with slightly older kids, with the younger children being back in those areas that are identified as children's parenting area, preschool, intergenerational area, family area.
Okay, and then last question for you, if you don't mind, Mr. Wilson. Exhibit A1 was a 2.5-page excerpt, I believe. Is there a reason that the entire 2013 report's not being submitted to us as evidence?
No, I mean, if you'd like it, we can certainly provide it for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no reason. It's lengthy. There's a lot of data in there that, may not be relevant to this particular application, but if you want it, you can have it.
Mr. Wilson's testimony started with a discussion of that report saying, I believe that there were a number of, I don't know if assumptions or qualifications or things that he mentioned that were in that report. Clearly, even from this excerpt, there are a lot of compromises. There's a lot of question about adequacy of the building as proposed. I'd like to see the full report.
Sure.
That's it, Bob.
Good. Jesse?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for your testimony so far. I think I have a bunch of questions, and I don't want to belabor the first one because I just want to get a better understanding on some square foot numbers that are not jiving to me, and it may just be a typo in the original report. If you refer to Exhibit 1, page 1, second paragraph, it refers to if the moderate estimate of 24,000 GSF, which I understand is gross square foot, is used. And then previously it talks about the Cicada report being as low as 21,000. I'm wondering if that is not supposed to be net, because we are now, what I'm seeing is that the existing gross floor area is listed on the civil plans as 31,791 and a proposal to go up to 37,000. So I just wanted to clear up if what was in the original report was actually talking about net usable square footage.
Yeah, we can only assume that the vast difference, the Cicada report talking about 36087 is very, very suspect. There's no way that anybody who has looked at this subsequently comes up with a number that's anywhere close to that. The 21,000 is on the low side. The 21,000 that Mr. Bowray found is on the low side, and the assumption there is that he really was talking about the usable or functional square feet, that he was not counting the area under the bank lobby, for example, that he was treating that as being outside of that usable 21,000 square feet, 21,000 square feet.
But I still don't see how, if we're currently saying that the existing library is 31,791, I don't understand the discrepancy between talking about 24,000. That's why I'm as an architect would feel like maybe that's about the difference between the net and gross, and maybe this is a question.
I think you're correct, and as I mentioned, we were hired by the library at that point. We did not have the facility to calculate. We can do some ballpark figures certainly in terms of interior spaces, but we're not equipped to figure the gross, which would include mechanical spaces, wall thicknesses, all those kinds of things. So I think your assumption is probably quite correct, that that difference is probably between net and gross square feet.
Okay, so then all of the further calculations that are made per capita, are those in regards to gross square feet?
Yes, that's the typical method would be to apply the population, service population to the gross square feet.
So then if you're using 24,000 in those calculations, but really the library is 31,000 gross square feet, aren't all these calculations incorrect?
The current library is not 31,000 square feet.
That's what this, all right, then I would call into question the civil document that we have here.
Yeah, well, we are going to present the plan, of course, with our civil engineer who will describe how she came up with her calculation from a building footprint standpoint over the course of the 3 levels that exist on the site.
I think we all have similar concerns, Andy, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes.
We need to nail down what the
This-
actual numbers are.
Seems to be a very foundational argument is about these figures and I only actually kind of figured this out while you were testifying, that this doesn't seem to make sense to me. So if we're talking a lot about the differences between 0.48, 0.5, 0.75, and 1.0 per capita, we really need to know what the size of the existing library is. So I would really like to get that clarified.
Okay.
But I don't want to belabor that. I have several other questions. You mentioned your work with Lower Merion, which I know a lot of people, look at the Ludington Library as very aspirational for what they would like to see. And Lower Merion has several branches. What is the benefit of having multiple branches for a municipality, for a library system?
When we worked with Lower Merion, we actually indicated to them that Lower Merion has more square feet than is necessary for serving Lower Merion. And we're very clear in public meetings that this was a choice that a community has to make, that offering that convenience in terms of walkability and kind of the flagship library such as Ludington is, that those are decisions that bring with them cost implications as far as staffing and everything else. It really comes down to, and we were told by the elected officials at that time in Lower Merion that they were willing to do that. So really the public was saying, we're willing to pay a premium for premium library service, and Lower Merion has it.
In your time working for Lower Merion, did you guys have any studies as to people kind of crossing municipalities to use the Lower Merion system?
The Montgomery County libraries do have or did have cooperative agreements as well. And so there are people that would use other libraries within the county.
In your expert opinion, would Haverford Township benefit from having satellite locations?
That's an interesting question. We typically would look at a population figure that is somewhere in the 50,000 range for when you might consider a branch library. So a service population, as you edge towards 50,000, you start to think about whether or not that's called for. You also have to look at geography and factors such as that. We have occasionally worked with libraries on a framework to try to provide services that are express library services. We made a recommendation, for example, in Omaha, Nebraska, for a drive-through location, essentially a place where people would be able to pick up books that they requested online. So again, a convenience service. What you're looking at when you start to consider branch locations is the minimal staffing implications that come into play. And when you start adding staff, you start adding kind of a structural debt kind of an issue because unlike building costs, those are costs that continue year after year after year, and in fact inflate year after year after year with salary increases and benefits going up and so on. And so it's not a step to be taken lightly. It could be a consideration. Basically, I haven't seen anything that would say that's a good place to go at the present time.
Thank you. And kind of riffing off of that point, there's been testimony presented that many other sites have been explored. Were you asked to look at any other sites?
I've seen a couple of the sites, but never was asked to evaluate any of them. I mentioned the 2012-2013 framework. When we were brought in by the library, we were asked to come back in 2015 and review some additional efforts, but not any of the alternative sites. I remember doing a drive-by a couple of the sites to see what had been rejected or what had been discussed as a possibility, but I was not involved in evaluating any of those sites.
So you were never asked to go inside the Brookline School and evaluate its suitability for a library?
That's correct. I was not asked to do that.
Or the old township building?
No.
Are you aware from working over the last 9 years with the library system of any of their opinions? And I don't want you to speculate, but if you had any direct conversations, where they asked your opinion on either the old township building or the Brookline School, do you have any direct knowledge of why those were dismissed? Because I have not personally heard any specific reasons other than they were just dismissed.
Nothing other than speculative kind of, nothing that I can offer that, is concrete. Others are probably much better equipped to answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Thank you.
Jessica?
Good evening. I just have a quick question for you about the functionality of the library layout. So currently it's shown with 2 above grade levels and 1 below grade level. If a building were to increase to, say, 3 above grade levels, would you see a decrease in functionality or a need for additional staff with that change?
That is the difficulty with multi-floor libraries. This is a small library for being a 2-story library. We would typically go up to somewhere around 35 or 40,000 square feet before considering a 2nd floor under normal circumstances. So the 3rd floor, and going back to saying that staffing costs are the ones that really are most expensive over time, that 3rd floor does raise additional supervision kinds of issues. It probably raises, I don't know your particular rules and so on, but given the nearby residential nature, I would think that the height restrictions are also something that might come into play.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Ed?
Yes, thank you. If you were, are you aware of any problems that the existing library has said that they were experiencing in regards to parking?
In regard to what?
Parking?
Oh, parking. By the standards that are typically applied for new buildings, this is a deficiency that you've got. The pluses on the parking really are the walkability, the number of people who both reside, as well as the student population that's within walking distance, and the amount of street parking that is available. I can honestly say that in my visits to the Haverford Library, which happened really all different times of day, that I didn't encounter a difficulty finding a parking space within an easy walking distance of the library. There were times that I experienced not being able to park in the parking lot, in the designated library parking lot, but was also always able to locate street parking within a very, very short distance. The area of most concern with the library parking is likely triggered by events and the size of events that would happen. In other words, the libraries that have the greatest difficulty with parking and those that really trigger the general rules that are applied for parking for new facilities are generally triggered because there are much larger meeting spaces than are being provided in this building. So I would think that the most severe parking situations would probably be associated with things like a summer reading program event. When you've got lots of kids coming and a little bit more vehicular traffic, but that's the exception rather than the rule. The framework normally is that street parking is in fact pretty readily available.
Okay, do you know the maximum staffing level at any given time in the library?
We were discussing that with Sukrit recently, and I think the maximum number of staff was the maximum number of bodies of staff members would be about 20, and it would range from about 6 being the minimum, so that at a time of lower demand, about the minimum number of people that would be in the building, public service staff only, no administrative, clerical, very little clerical staff and so on would be 6, that the high number at a high use time with a heavy programming load might be 20.
Do you know if the library currently has a policy in which their staff are required to park in the surrounding residential streets and not in their own parking lot?
I don't believe they park in the parking lot, but I don't know what the policy is.
Okay. Question I had about the library, do they rent any off-site storage?
Not to my knowledge.
Does you know of anything that the library currently does not offer that most modern libraries do that makes us not as well situated as other townships?
I think that a couple of things. I think one is the one that I just mentioned in terms of meeting space. This is, I'd characterize it adequate but modest in terms of meeting space. This is, if we were designing a brand new library, the number of meeting seats and the flexible meeting space would be larger. There was, some attempt in that lower level to really maximize the amount of space that, the amount of seating that can be had in the meeting space in the lower level. I would characterize the plan that was done in 2013, the within the footprint plan, as being kind of analogous to the tiny house movement. Essentially, the effort on the part of the architects that worked on that, and Mr. Casaccio was one of the principals in that effort, was really to say the same kind of thing that happens in designing a tiny house. how do we make multiple uses of the same space? How do we minimize the amount of space used for the circulation of people? One of the things that was identified very early on in that first effort was the enormous amount of space that was being given to corridors and the elimination of corridors by creatively reconfiguring some spaces. So every effort was made to kind of capture some space back to make that space as usable as possible. Where I go with that is, you know, I'm a great admirer of the tiny house movement. I'd like to live in one for a weekend or maybe for a week, but I don't know that I'd want to live there for the next 20 years. And, you know, consequently, you know, what we've got in front of you here is a bit of a compromise, but I think a reasonable compromise that does allow the library to offer pretty much the full range of services that you were speaking of that are offered by a 21st century library.
Okay, recognizing that there are drawbacks to the site and it doesn't fit. So what, do you know what the capacity of the community room is? That's a meeting room space, I would imagine?
Yeah, I don't have the number on the current configuration. Again, Mr. Casaccio may have that figure available for you.
Okay, let me go back to something that you provided testimony on. You said that our usage numbers in our Haverford Township Library currently are greater than some of the libraries surrounding us, which are much larger. Did I hear that correctly?
You did.
Okay, so we're already doing a good job of having more people attend our library than libraries that were built much larger. How does that justify the need for an additional space? Where are we lacking? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
A lot of it has to do with that effort that I mentioned that says that libraries aren't just about the physical items that you check out anymore. That the 21st century library has moved, particularly with young people, into the area of being a place where hands-on learning takes place. That's true of young children. It's true of the teens. The effort of libraries to incorporate and work closely with schools on STEM initiatives, for example, is really kind of rebirthed the library as far as teens are concerned. The teens over the last decade are more visible in libraries than they've ever been in the history of public libraries. And it is primarily that aspect that is bringing them in.
So basically, the library is being used for everything but books, and that's increasing. So I mean, like I'm looking at that innovation zone and hands-on learning is sort of like the Please Touch Museum down in Philadelphia. Is that, am I visualizing that correctly?
I think what you're missing is that what libraries have done in creating maker spaces and innovation zones and that kind of thing is the difference is that you're providing that learning experience in an information-rich environment, in an environment that has the books, that in fact has the computer resources close by and available. You know, we've experienced situations in which I'll give you an example. I attended a teen program in which the kids were doing a Halloween theme kind of a thing that had to do with body parts. And in fact, what you had is a group of teens working on computers and working with anatomy books to be able to figure out what a stomach really looked like or what a brain really looked like. And so it's the information-rich environment in which the hands-on learning is taking place that really makes a difference. The other area that I'd point to is the intergenerational aspect of libraries. Right now, that's something that really is one that is a lack. The addition powerfully provides that opportunity for family space and for encouraging families to come to libraries together. And that family may be a traditional family. That family may be grandma and grandpa and a child, or a foster parent and a child, or some other caregiver and a child. But getting those children into libraries with adult companionship and supervision is a plus for everyone.
So the idea of people coming to the library and borrowing books and taking them home is not the focus of libraries today?
It remains a focus. It's not an either or. And there's lots of very, very fascinating research regarding the whole area of e-resources versus print materials. And in fact, we've gone past the peak of the e-book, even in the COVID period. The sale of e-book resources got up to about 20% and has hit a plateau and has actually declined a bit. So we're still at about 80% print resources, and it has befuddled everyone, not the least the publishers who wish everything were online and that the public didn't still vastly prefer print on paper.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
All right. Andy, do you have any other questions for your witness?
No, I think we're good for the time being.
All right.
Can I ask a,
And do you expect to keep Bill with us for the rest of the night? There may be additional questions that come up, so I would ask you to. If you
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, are you okay staying on?
Sure, I can stay.
can I ask one more? Yeah, one more quick follow-up. I just want to establish for when we find out the square footage, what population for the township are we using? And I'm not sure, is that a question for you, Mr. Wilson?
It's not one that I have readily at hand. It's one that I did research previous to making a presentation with the commissioners. I can get that and offer it to you later on if you wish.
Okay.
I'll look it up
Is it
for you.
around, ballpark 50,000?
55. That's what's in the report.
Yeah.
Oh, is the number in there?
It says nearly 50,000 people, right?
Nearly 50,000 people.
Okay,
But you want a more finite number than that, right, Jeff?
sure,
Yeah,
yes.
that's basically what I was referring to when we were talking about the branch situation. That you're in that range where you start to think about it. So it's not a question that's certainly off the wall. It's a question that is a rational question, but one that may be a little premature.
Right. So it'd be fair to say we're at the tipping point of
Yeah.
a typical municipality looking at a branch system.
That's correct.
Really quick, there is and I'm sure we'll hear about it more in detail, there is a traffic report, and it refers to 2 book drops that were added and have been successful. Were you asked to consult on those book drops?
No, but that's a very typical step that libraries take to kind of relieve some of the pressure on the on-site book drops.
And would that be something that you would be able to consult on further if, say 2 additional book drops would help alleviate trip generation to the library? Would that be something that you would be able to consult the library on, other locations that would work?
Yeah, we can, what we can offer is the experience of quite a number of other libraries. One that I didn't mention when I was talking about the express library concept was grocery stores are very popular as drop sites for materials. So it's those places that have a very public aspect. City of Wichita, Kansas, has a branch, or did have a branch. I haven't visited recently to find out whether it's still there. But it was in a tiny space within a grocery store, a very popular grocery store, the kind of space that you see in some grocery stores that would be occupied by a florist, for example. So a very small space, but it served a purpose of doing precisely what you're talking about, taking some of that pressure off of the main facility with minimal staffing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Wilson, I'd like to follow up one question, if I could. The excerpt from your report talks about the size of the collection, and there had been some prior suggestions as to what an aspirational collection would look like. Can you talk a little bit about how the collection is currently and would be stored, and whether you have been consulting with the library board about high-density shelving, rolling shelving, in order to maximize the space that can house the collection in the smallest square foot?
Yeah, the issue of high-density storage in a library of this size is one that usually doesn't come into play. There can be, obviously, you can store about twice the number of books in the same space by the use of high-density shelving that would get used in an academic framework, for example, so that there is that real plus. However, in the public library world, the large portion of use really is a browsing use, and the high-density storage simply does not lend itself to that type of usage, and so it would be difficult in the footprint that is presented to effectively use it and effectively save much space.
So does any portion of the current collection, is it accessible only by requesting a book to be brought forth by an employee?
No, right now it's open shelf library.
100%.
The thing that would be different from that would be, requesting an item that's currently out in circulation, or placing a hold on the item so that when it comes back in, it's held for you until you come and pick it up, or for a reasonable period of time, or interlibrary loans, materials coming from other libraries. But it's your library and almost all libraries of this size would be totally open shelf collections.
And so the libraries in the adjoining communities that you've worked with, they are all open shelf, none of them have high density storage?
The only one with high density storage is, we'll go back to Lower Merion with its premium library service. Behind the Ardmore Library, there is a building that contains high density storage, and so the Lower Merion Library does have a relatively small amount of off-site storage. Those items, at least the framework that existed several years ago, was that those items could be requested and delivered to any of the libraries the next day.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll get back. Call your next witness.
Okay.
All right. We're off the record. All right, we'll reconvene the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board of Thursday, August 5th, 2021. So we have Bill Wilson standing by if anybody has any more questions or anything comes up that causes you to want to ask Bill additional questions, just let me know. Otherwise, Andy?
Sure, before I call my next witness, I will note that I assume we're going to be coming back for another hearing. So I will have someone from the library board, the president, Phil Goldsmith, testify, probably at the end of my last testimony, just to obviously answer any questions that you may have of him, but I'll be asking him some of the questions that you've raised with Bill in order to get you the answers to those questions. So I'll call Lee Casasio, please. And I guess I'll have Lee stand here. Shall I use that microphone?
Yes.
Okay.
How are you, Lee?
Good morning, good
Been a while.
afternoon, good evening. Nice to see you.
All right, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and the capacity in which you appear for the board, please?
Lee A. Casasio, appearing as architect.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Lee, I'm going to have you go through some of your qualifications and background for the board. My intent is to have you recognized as an expert in the field of architecture. Can you just tell the board about your educational and professional background?
Received a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Notre Dame. I practiced as principal of Casasio Architects, LLC from 1979 until 2016, at which time I transitioned my practice to Bernardin, where I continue to serve as director.
Okay. And over the course of your career, do you have experience representing property owners and developers with zoning and land development matters in various municipalities?
I do.
Okay, and have you provided testimony at public hearings before zoning hearing boards and municipal governing bodies?
I have.
Have you testified before this board before?
I have.
Okay. And at those hearings and before this board, have you been recognized as an expert in the field of architecture?
I have.
Those are all the questions on Mr. Casassio's qualifications that I have.
Okay, and our solicitor has some basic questions that he always asks. So, Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Casascio. Since the last time you testified before this board, has your licensure been revoked or suspended for any reason whatsoever?
No.
Have you been reprimanded for any actions in terms of the performance of your profession?
No.
Have you been denied the right to testify as an expert in any courts or before any planning commissions or zoning boards since that time?
No.
That's all I have, Mr. King.
There's no objection or question from any of my fellow board members. We'll accept Lee Casascio as an expert in the area of architecture. Go ahead, Andy.
Great. Lee, before I get into, I guess, the planned testimony, if it's okay with you, I had a question with respect to the square footage of the proposed addition,
Right.
And the existing building, for that matter. Would you mind just trying to answer that question and giving us, to the best of your ability, the information that board's seeking?
Right. We've calculated the gross area of the existing building, a total of 31,791 gross square feet. That's the existing building. The proposed expansions include a little bit of area for the new entrance at all levels, along with the proposed second floor expansion of what's before us tonight. So the proposed total floor area, again gross, is 37,138 square feet. And that proposed second floor addition that we're talking about is nominally 5,100 square feet. It's actually 5,091 gross square feet.
And Lee, there hasn't been calculation of the net square footage, is that correct? Just
No, there has not been.
All right, you were a resident of Haverford Township, is that correct, Lee?
I was.
Okay, for how long?
From 1952 until 1984.
And as a resident, you're familiar with the library, is that correct?
I am, yes. In fact, I used the library as a grade school student, as a young lad.
And you have also been involved with the library professionally, correct?
I have.
And can you explain for the board the history of your professional engagement with the library?
Yes, in late 2012, my firm was engaged to prepare a planning study and later to design the renovations to the library. And we've been working on this proposal ever since.
And through your engagement with the library, have you become familiar with the various studies and other professional analysis related to the library facility, which you mentioned during Mr. Wilson's testimony?
I have.
And would you agree that the studies and the analysis that have been conducted to date have all concluded that the library needs to expand in order to provide the community with the library services expected of a modern library?
I would.
Okay. And the library last expanded in 1970, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Your recollection, for about how many years has the township, the community as a whole, and the library been considering the expansion of the library?
Well, at least 20 years, going back to the Cicada report that was published in about 2003, but probably closer to 30 years if you consider some of the other studies. For example, the bubblegum factory, the now YMCA site, and actually going back to 1988, where library expansion was included in the township's comprehensive plan.
Okay, let's drill down on that a little bit more. So the library had, to your knowledge, the library has considered options for expansion both on and around the existing property, and also through the construction of a new library or the renovation of an existing structure elsewhere in the township?
That's correct.
Okay, and based on your recollection, can you name a few of those sites that were considered?
I can. Some of the sites include this site. The library was considered to be part of this complex, and that was voted, commissioners voted against that. It was better for police than just township building. Some of these studies were studied more than others. For example, the township building, the former township building site was considered. It was quickly deemed too small. It had right-of-way problems, SEPTA right-of-way problems, and the cell tower, it was an issue there. The Stratford Friends School, which is the old Lanark School, was studied. That was, again, too small. An addition would have been needed. Extensive renovations would have been required to be ADA compliant and so forth, and on-site parking was limited. The Grimes Center over by St. Denis was studied, and that would have been very disruptive to that neighborhood, and there were other problems with that site. I heard the Oakmont School was considered at one time, but I wasn't personally involved in that. Most recently, the Brookline School was considered, as you may know. Also, the former Manoa School site was studied, and that was ruled out. And as mentioned earlier, I'm aware that the what's now the YMCA site was considered.
And to the extent that you don't have firsthand knowledge of some of those options, we're willing to provide the board with some more details through other testimony, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are you aware of options that were previously considered that involved the current library property?
I am.
Okay. Can you identify some of those options that were considered?
Yeah, a couple studies. One was to actually consider demolition of the library, and with a multi-level parking, and that was cost prohibitive. Another study was to acquire adjacent residential property, and that was felt too disruptive to the neighbors and the neighborhood. There was another study that considered acquisition of the commercial properties along Darby Road to the north of the library. That had cost issues with it. Obviously, the properties would all have to be acquired, and as well as that involved lost tax ratables.
Okay. And then let's move to the proposal and the proposed addition. All right, Lee?
Mhm.
Okay. You're familiar with the expansion. That's the subject of the zoning application.
I am.
Is that right?
Yes,
And you mentioned this, but it involves an addition to the second floor that would be located entirely on the existing library property. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. And Bernardin, your current architectural firm, they prepared perspective and elevations of the proposed addition. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I pre-marked for identification A3, 4, and 5. Okay. I also have boards here for illustrative purposes. And I know Kelly has the ability to display items on the screen, so I think we're covered on visuals. But what I'd like you to do is walk us through the perspective and the elevations. If we can start with A3, okay, and just describe the proposed improvements to the library and the proposed addition.
A3 is a perspective of the proposed second floor expansion. This is a view looking west on Mill Road toward Darby Road. And what's shown in the far corner is the sliver of the existing old bank building, the original library, the proposed entrance, the new entrance to the library, some renovations to the 79 addition, and then starting in the corner would be the proposed addition. You can see from there all the way over to the right is the proposed second floor expansion supported over the parking area.
On to A4.
A4, yeah. So this is a floor, A4, the south elevation on the top. It's divided into 4 parts. Again, the on the left side is the rendition of the existing library, the original bank building library. The stone will be cleaned and repointed where needed. All the windows will be replaced. Then the second part is the new library entrance, and we'll see a better view of that, a more detailed view of that in a minute. And I'll explain that when we get to it. The third part is the 79 edition. And what we have there is we're proposing insulated synthetic stucco system to replace the existing metal panels that are leaking and unrepairable. The new system will be similar in texture and jointing to the original. There's also some brown brick below that. And then the fourth part, you can see, again on the right side, the beginning of the second floor expansion area. On the east elevation, that's looking at it from the DeVault property, which is the resident next door, looking at the east elevation. And you can see some concrete columns below holding up the proposed second floor expansion. On the right side, you can just for the 6 feet of the northernmost, the right side of the second floor expansion is actually set back about 6 feet from the property line, and we'll discuss that further. There's also, you can also see a fence on that east elevation. It's this new 6-foot fence. I think we can go to the next exhibit, Andy.
Would be exhibit
This is looking at the proposed expansion from the north. The rightmost part of the expansion is from the commercial property adjacent to the library, and the left side is looking at it from the Hammonds, who own the residence in that part of the adjacent property line. So again, continuing the synthetic stucco system, high windows above 6 feet along that setback area. And you can see the 6-foot fence, the new 6-foot fence dotted in, dashed in along the bottom.
And then we'll turn to two additional renderings that have been pre-marked as A6 and A7B. Here were those renderings, and office prepared those renderings?
Yes, so this is a rendering of the proposed entrance, and this was designed previously, several years ago, primarily as a response to the requirement for accessibility. There's a new elevator there. The stairs are reworked, and it's also designed so that when you enter, one can descend to the meeting rooms on the lower level, while the rest of the library could be closed off if that was a requirement.
And that's A6 you were referring to, correct?
Correct.
And then now we're going to go to A7 for the record.
And this was an earlier rendering showing from Darby Road, looking down Mill at the original library, the entrance, and then the renovations of the '79 edition.
And Lee, you're familiar with the zoning relief that's being requested in connection with the proposed addition, correct?
I am.
Okay. And some of that relief is a result of the fact that the proposed addition brings the second floor of the library building closer to the property, right?
Correct.
Okay. And based on your working relationship and engagement by a library, as a result of the proximity to the property lines, has the library been sensitive to the impacts of the addition?
They have been.
Okay. And as a result, did the library meet with its neighbors regarding the addition prior to the hearing?
It has.
Okay.
The library sent letters out to adjacent, to 8 property owners of adjacent properties, and 6 of those owners were met with to discuss the proposed plans.
And were you a part of some or all of those meetings?
I was a part of 5 of those meetings, yes.
Okay. And in an effort to address the comments raised by some of the neighbors, were changes made to the proposed addition and the elevation you just described?
We did make some modifications and proposed to the neighbors' concern. For one, as I mentioned earlier, we set the second floor expansion back off the property line about 6 feet, where we adjoin the Hammond property. As I said earlier, the windows there were raised to 6 foot above the floor elevation. We also talked a lot about landscaping, both at the corner of the property and also actually on the Hammond's property. And we proposed to come to some agreement with township input as to the best landscaping to provide there.
And are there other improvements that are being proposed as part of the addition which take into consideration the immediately adjoining neighbors?
Yeah, in addition, we're proposing a new fence along the entire property line, and buffer plantings will be proposed between the parking lot and the DeVault property, which is the residence immediately to the east. It's about a 5-foot planting buffer there.
And can you speak a little bit to the overall aesthetics, particularly the east elevation of?
Yeah, we think that the east elevation, as we've shown, is a improvement over what exists now.
And you are obviously familiar with the neighborhood that surrounds the library, professionally and as a former resident?
I am, yeah.
And do you think the proposed addition will alter the character of the neighborhood?
I don't. I think that the library's been there a long time. I think it's part of the fabric of the neighborhood. We've tried to be very sensitive in finessing the design of the expansion area in as harmonious a way as possible and minimizing the impact on the neighborhood. And I actually think that the character of the neighborhood might even be enhanced by the appearance of the overall proposed improvements.
So those are all the questions that actually, you know what, let's, before we move on to the board, let's try and address a couple of the questions that maybe they raised with Bill that we can possibly address. There was a question with respect to the basement area there on the first floor. Can you just speak a little bit to why that has been designated as storage as opposed to possibly program space?
In our some previous work several years ago, we actually considered making that a programmed area. One of the areas would be a makerspace or another program area. We would have had to, because of the low ceiling height, we would have had to excavate the existing floor a couple feet. We would be involved in underpinning foundations. And so we were really concerned about that. When we came up with this idea of the potential of a second floor expansion, for all the reasons that Bill Wilson explained, that was a much better, we felt, utilization of funds and such. So we decided to just leave that area underneath the old library as storage, as a friends area, which is needed and such. So because of the cost of the underpinning and excavation, because of the water problem, there's been a lot of water problems even recently. There's a lot of groundwater, there's been issues, and we think that would add to the risk. And thirdly, because right now, because the meeting rooms are on the lower level, that's a different staffing requirement than if we had program space there. That would require extra staff, additional staff on a separate level. So for all those reasons, the library decided not to pursue those kinds of improvements.
And similarly, with respect to questions that were previously asked by the board, it looks like A2 has been brought up on the screen, and in particular, sheet 1, which shows the lower level. There's the community room that's shown in the middle there. I think there was a question about how many people can occupy that room. Do you have a general idea of that occupancy?
We do. We've estimated about 165 people in the combined. There's actually two rooms that could be combined into one. And so that would be about 165 people. That's by a code standard. I'm not exactly sure what the existing community rooms hold, but this would be a little bit more. And in addition to that, we're expanding the restrooms, improving the kitchen storage area. And we've actually carved out another storage area that's shown in blue there into the existing mechanical room. As Bill Wilson said earlier, we've tried in every case to just squeeze more efficient utilization of space, and there are some of the ways that we've done it.
And just to be clear, that their community room exists down there today.
Correct.
Correct. It just getting slightly larger, potentially under this conceptual
Slightly
plan.
larger and more functional, and more flexible.
Those are all the questions that I have at this point.
Lee, does the community room get rented out? Do you know?
I don't, not that I know of. Does it get rented out? Yes. Does it? Okay, I'm sorry.
If you don't know, then
I didn't know.
they testify.
Sorry.
I'll take notes, of course, and make sure
I'm
we get
wondering
that.
if it's going to be rented out for events,
Yeah, understood.
and how that might impact the parking. Questions, Jesse?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Casaccio. Thank you for appearing. I'll start with an easy one. You made, in viewing the renderings, you pointed out the brick. Is that the existing brick to remain?
Yes,
Okay.
and that will also be cleaned and pointed as needed.
Thank you for clarifying. I have a simple question, and if you can't answer this, and if this is for the civil engineer, I will defer, but there is a large tree shown to be removed. Is there a particular reason that that tree can't remain?
Yes, well, I guess it could remain. Well, actually, it can't remain, because, I think because of the new parking configuration, but also it was a concern of our neighbors because it drops its droppings over the property line onto our neighbor's patio area.
Is it known to be diseased in any way?
I don't know.
I believe you mentioned that there will be upgrades to accessibility and a new elevator.
Yes,
And I believe that I've heard, perhaps maybe not tonight, but anecdotally, that one of the reasons the Brookline School was not considered, and maybe you know firsthand, was that it would require an elevator and ADA upgrades.
the existing school building.
The existing Brookline School.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I could guess, but I don't know.
Were you involved in any of the studies of looking at the Brookline School?
I was involved in the study of proposing a new ground-up library at the Brookline School.
But not a renovation of the Brookline School? Okay. Go back to my original. Can you confirm that, are you aware that the library is a listed historical asset in the township?
I'm not sure I wouldn't know that that's the exact designation, but I know that we appeared before the Historic Commission, is that what?
You will appear, or you have?
We have.
You have, and you will appear again?
I believe we will, yeah.
If the variance was granted and you proceeded with the renovation or the addition, you would appear before the Historical Commission
Right.
and take any of their input on
They
it?
did not have any exception to what's proposed other than the second floor expansion.
Have you looked at expanding to a third floor over any of the existing 1979?
Not in detail.
Are you aware if it's structurally capable of a third floor?
As the structure exists, I'm not aware, but I don't think it is, as it exists.
Has any exploration been done as far as looking at further expansion of a lower level, maybe even under the parking lot, the current parking lot?
Yes,
And have those studies been dismissed as too expensive?
yes, and that was presented to the commissioners.
Okay. Could you speak to, and if you can't, it could be somebody else, but could you speak to if the library will need to be relocated during construction?
My understanding is that it will be.
Do you have any idea where it would be relocated to?
I don't.
So the library, your understanding would be the library would be closed during this construction because it's a pretty significant endeavor?
At this location.
At the current location, yeah. And do you know any impact on the neighbors during construction as far as deliveries, parking, contractor parking, lay down of materials, et cetera?
Not specifically.
But those studies will be generated and okay, reviewed with the township staff.
Yes.
Okay. There was a hatched area on the, maybe it's on the civil plan, but could you describe the area outside of the new entry area? There's a hatched area that I'll point at. It's kind of a brown hatch on the civil plan, but could you kind of describe that architecturally?
My understanding is that's just a paving pattern.
Okay. It's flush to the ground?
Yes,
Okay, flush to the sidewalk?
yes. That's my understanding. You can see it on that rendering.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I understand now. Thank you. That's all I have for now. I'll defer to my
Actually,
colleagues.
I stand corrected. I think that if I was pointing to this rendering when I was talking about the Historic Commission, those two, what would you call them, light wells, won't be needed now anyway because we're not utilizing the lower level there. And I think that was a problem with the Historic Commission too. That won't
That's
be.
Exhibit A7. that you're referring to.
A7, I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, when, to clarify that for the record, when was this rendering presented to the Historical Commission?
Several years ago. I don't remember the exact date.
Okay, because I sat on the Historical Commission for a couple of years and I don't recall that, so it was before my time on the board then. Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Jesse?
Yes.
So, Lee, what are those two wells on A7?
There are two window wells there that were there back when the bank was built. And when we were thinking about utilizing that lower space, we were trying to bring some natural light in. So that was the intent there, but that goes away.
Bill?
I was going to ask you about the light wells. So at some point you did think about digging down the basement. And you testified a little while ago that there's water infiltration issues under the existing building. Is that in that area?
There's been water problems throughout the lower area.
Right. And so what are you doing about that water problem if you're not going to renovate that area?
We're going to address it.
How? How would someone normally address it?
I guess we haven't, the library hasn't gotten to that point in the evaluation yet, I don't think. I mean, we're still trying to get a zoning approval here, so I don't know that we don't have that level of detail. Yeah.
You're asking us for zoning relief
Yeah.
by expanding the building, yet you have known adverse conditions in your existing building, the remediation of which has a price tag, presumably, and might also accommodate, by fixing that problem, reduce some of the, or offset some of the costs that might otherwise go into repurposing that for programming. I'm trying to figure out why we wouldn't be looking at that as part of the solution here.
Well, I mean, I think it's more than just the water problem, as Lee testified.
I'm sure it is.
Right.
All I was asking about is what are you doing about the water problem?
Well, yeah, I don't know the answer to that question either at this point, and I don't think Lee does.
Is that more of a civil engineering question than a?
That's more of a technical question for our technical team. We've studied it. I'm just not completely, I can guess, but I'm not completely conversant to give you a 100% confident answer. It's been considered. It's not a part of this application because this is a second floor addition. So it was part of it. I think we were 95% complete construction documents for the renovation. And that was included, that remediation that was included. I'm just not prepared tonight to give you a very technical, specific answer.
Yeah, you understand why we're interested in both this space as well as the unexcavated space on the north elevation, I guess it would be, or I guess it's the south elevation. The area on the same page that's marked in white as unexcavated. And you just responded to the question from Mr. Poynton that you're not looking at excavating under the parking area either. And so I presume this is purely on cost? Is that why we wouldn't be looking at that area, at that type of work?
Excavating under the existing.
Any of those three spaces on the lower level, the existing space that's marked for storage, the unexcavated space within the existing building footprint, or the area that would be under the parking lot?
Cost, risk, water risk,
Yeah.
and staffing.
Okay. And so the staffing would be more onerous for the library for this space than it would be for the second floor space?
Right.
Okay. And what is the cost differential that has taken these 3 spots off the table?
I don't know what the exact dollars are this evening.
Is this plan based, where would the funds be coming for this whole project? Just from the township?
Yes,
And
primarily, as I
are
understand
they
it.
giving you a budget for that?
We are developing budgets, yes.
So they haven't agreed?
We have a budget that was presented to the commissioners, yes.
And have they voted on that budget?
I believe so, yeah.
And
They,
you
at least
don't
to
know what the
the,
numbers?
I do, I just don't have it at my
Okay, well,
fingertips.
we can follow up with other
It's public and, yeah.
witnesses, right? In the corner of the original bank, on the second floor, it's a 2-story space, I think,
Correct.
if I'm reading the plans right. And obviously, that sacrifices a little floor area on the upper level, second level. What was the decision there to sacrifice floor space in a building as, for which so many compromises are being made, to have a 2-story ground floor area?
Well, that could be done, of course. There were some considerations. One is the fact that again, thinking about the historical significance of this, and the proposed use is a beautiful living room with a fireplace for seniors and all ages. That was one consideration, the aesthetic one. That then carries over to the windows, the 2-story arched windows, that you could do anything, you can deal with it, but that would, in my opinion, negatively impact that. And thirdly, because of the way the space flowed and so forth, it just worked out that the staff lounge is there, some new toilet rooms are there, there's some mechanical space, some other restrooms, and then there's that one space that's part of the administrative area. So you could do it, but it was decided not to.
We heard from the prior witness about much-needed tutoring space. Presumably that's for kids, maybe, for tutors, right?
Anyone.
Being tutored. It just struck me that for the space designated for seniors, that we're providing them essentially 2 floors of what otherwise would have been available floor space, and we're limiting ourselves to simply 2 tutoring rooms. It strikes me as a policy decision favoring seniors over children. Was that part of the design plan?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So my point is, on the second level, second floor, there's 2 designated tutor rooms.
Correct.
We heard evidence earlier that tutoring space is much needed. I think that was the quote from our prior witness. But this area designated for a senior reading room is a 2-story area that essentially absorbs floor area on 2 different floors that could have been. That if it had been a 1-story room, we might have had more room for instance, tutoring rooms to meet that need. I was just wondering about that compromise. What was the design thinking behind that?
We have tutor rooms on the first floor. We have 2 large tutor rooms.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
We heard that it's much needed. So I'm wondering, okay, in the design, there was some compromises being made. And one of them is we're going to have a 2-story senior space, and we're going to have 2 tutoring rooms. And I'm just wondering, was that the type of compromises in the design that was?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that the tutor rooms were much needed over what exists now, and we're providing a lot more tutor rooms in this plan.
Do you have the comparison between current tutoring space and the new tutoring space?
I don't think I have an existing plan with me, but there aren't many.
Okay, and further, there's other elements in the package of exhibits, including letters from neighbors, one of whom says, we desperately need more tutoring space. And I'm just, while you're here, as the sort of architect who came up with the design, I'm just trying to figure out if we're really meeting that, or that need, or if we are compromising and, for instance, creating a two-story space for the aesthetics for seniors.
I don't think we're compromising it. I think we have a good number of tutor rooms, and we have more meeting rooms also. Tutor rooms a lot of times are used as small meeting spaces or work spaces. So we have not only the tutor rooms that are shown, but some additional meeting rooms as are shown.
Okay. So Andy, maybe we could get the existing floor plans?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so we can
With
use
an
them as a
understanding of
basis
the,
for
of the,
comparison.
the understanding of the current tutoring space.
Yeah, the whole floor.
Hopeful.
Yeah, just so we can see
We have,
the functional differences that would.
Not with me. We do, sure.
do.
Yeah.
okay.
I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Jessica?
Thank you.
I just pull up the exhibit number. So on exhibit 4, you're showing the innovation room addition, which is going to be closest to the adjacent residential property. And it's the height of that addition is not labeled. I was wondering if you know how tall that innovation room will be.
I don't know exactly, but it's under the allowable height, and it's less than the height of the existing cooling tower that you can see on the elevations. Can I
Correct, but
see-
it's approximately 25 feet proud of that cooling tower, correct?
I'm sorry?
It's approximately 25 feet proud of that cooling tower, closer to the residential
Oh,
property.
I see what you mean. Yes, that's shown on the civil. It's about 23 feet.
Okay. Were any sun studies done of this addition to see whether that neighboring residential property would be shaded by this addition?
Studies were not done, no.
Is that something that could be done?
Could be, sure.
Okay.
Are you asking for them to be done, Jess?
Yes.
I just wanted to make that clear. Because you asked if they could be.
I presume anything can be done, but we'll try and get the information for you best we
Thank
can.
you.
yeah.
I don't have any other questions.
Ed?
Yes, I'm looking at the north elevation, and if you could help me understand what I'm looking at here.
What exhibit is that?
I think it's exhibit 5.
Yes.
There is an area above the elevation of the second floor. Sort of like, looks like brown brick. What is that? Is that currently there?
That's the cooling tower beyond on the roof.
So it's not another floor, it's just
It's an enclosure for the cooling tower.
is it existing?
Yes,
Okay. Now I'm looking at, I understand that the Dowd property and the Hammond property are residential properties.
correct.
What is the Falcone property?
Dowd is actually the former owner. The DeVaults live there now, but yeah.
Okay, I got you. But what is the Falcone property?
The Falcone property is the adjacent commercial property.
Okay, it's a commercial property.
Yeah.
So can you explain, like looking at the north elevation here, exactly what I'm looking at here? Is that the building goes underneath your building?
That is the what would be white on the right side of the north elevation?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
that's the Falcone building.
Does it go underneath your,
No, good question. What you're seeing above that is the brown brick would be the existing library beyond the Falcone building.
oh, so it's depth perception, I
Yeah.
can't see the depth.
Correct.
Okay. I see on the Falcone property that, is there windows on that back?
There are, but it's set back a little bit from the property line.
Okay, I'm just trying to, I don't know what he has on that's a two-story building?
It is.
And can you look from the library addition
There-
into that?
No, there'll be no windows on that, what would be west elevation.
Okay, that answers my question. The other, it's probably not yours, but there is on the Falcone property, on the engineering plans, there's some weird property line. Is there an alleyway or something back there?
Yes. Like to the north of our parking area?
Correct.
Yeah, there's a right of way. There's an alley.
Okay, so the Falcone property, I see the north elevation shows that, but is there any structures on the Falcone property to the north?
Yes, there is.
Is it wrap around the building also?
Yes.
So would it come all the way down the whole length of the north elevation?
No,
How far does it go?
I don't remember. We can look on an aerial and see.
Is it,
Maybe half the way, as I recall.
out there
There's
and
a
behind
small, yeah, there's a small one-story annex at that portion of the
One
property.
story.
Yeah,
And does he have parking behind it then?
a little bit, I think, yeah.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Now, on the front entrance, does the new entrance encroach any closer to Mill Road than the existing entrance?
Yes, slightly. And the civil engineer will
Okay.
explain that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
I thought of another question. Back to, I guess we'll refer to the north elevation and also the property line where are we going now to a zero setback for a portion of the north elevation?
Yes. 0 for a portion of it, and then as we approach the Hammond property, it'll be 6 feet.
And I think that there was testimony that that was one of the compromises or one of the agreements made with meeting with the neighbors was to set that back?
That's correct.
Okay. Could you describe, for the record, what is required for a zero setback wall?
I should be able to do it more technically than I can.
In general, in layman's terms.
It's a fire rating required by the code, which we will provide.
Are windows usually allowed on a party line wall?
No.
And so is it fair to say that in the compromise, by setting it back, you were actually allowed by code to add those windows that would not normally have been allowed?
Yes, but we had windows previously when we had no windows on the north side. We had more windows on the east side.
Okay. Is it more expensive to build a fire-rated wall than a non-fire-rated wall?
Theoretically, I guess.
That's all. Thank you.
Slightly, in this case. I'm not sure that the fire rating would be different from the 6-foot setback from the 0. I don't know that.
Anything else? Jessica? Ed?
No.
Nope. Okay. Any other questions for your witness?
No, I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're up, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe I'm gonna be able to get through my direct of the civil in 20 minutes, so, I don't know if you just wanna start fresh with a new witness the next time, that might be the,
Do you think you could do the traffic in 20 minutes?
okay. Yeah, we can give it a shot, sure. I mean, I just prefer to come back. That'd be my preference. Instead of rushing through anything and, that'd just be the best at this point. At this time, yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to cover tonight, Andy, before we,
No, I have my list of things you're looking for.
okay? Well, any other requests while we're here? So Kel, what's our meeting schedule look like?
Good question.
That's not-
So August, next Thursday is planning, so they'll be here, so we cannot do that week. The 19th room is also being used, and I believe that a few of you are on vacation. We have Haverford and Buck resuming on the 26th. We have a number of residential cases, I believe, on September 2nd. So that's a great question. 16, what do we have for this? Nothing scheduled for the 16th yet. We could
September
do
16th?
September 16th.
What about the 9th?
Hopefully I get through the review that we're doing on the 12th with planning, because that is a planning date. We can't continue to steal their dates. So, all right, let's go for the 9th, and if there's any conflicts, we'll just have to re-advertise and I'll let everybody know.
Well, what I'm thinking, Kel, is move the 16th, since it's an empty agenda, to the 9th, just to get it over with. Move it up and do it quick.
No, I understand.
So the 9th would replace the 16th, not be in addition to.
I see. Okay, we might have to do another special meeting, maybe on that 5th Thursday, because we do have, obviously, Haverford and Buck needs to finish up, and we do have a number of other cases besides these two.
So that's the 23rd you're talking about, right?
The 30th would be the 5th. Yeah, we can discuss that later on.
Okay. So we're looking at the 9th. Andy, what's your schedule look like?
The 9th?
Yes.
Sounds great, yeah.
Everybody, Jess, Ed, you guys good on the 9th?
I think so.
Jesse, Billy?
I think so.
I'm trying to move it up a week. Our next meeting is until the 16th in September. So,
Yeah, the 9th would be great. It works.
yeah. All right. Kel, we have a room the 9th? So we're going to flip the 16th to the 9th. Try to get these guys done. Good, Ed?
Yep.
7:30?
Yes. So with that, we will continue this case to our newly just scheduled September 9th, 2021 hearing. Unless there's any other administrative matters. Didn't answer anything. Ed? And we will, what'd you say? All right, with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
I didn't see him either.